You know how we sometimes have this specific type of gameplay that just blows us away and makes anything that looks similar so breathtakingly desirable? Or is it just me? Because for me it's the first-person view medieval or fantasy melee wombat. Okay, it's really combat, but please, somebody, make this game.
Hi, I am Not-a-witchr, and I always envy them, because they have swords, and not just one, but two.
Ever since the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind showed me that the first-person view is not only for shooters, it has been my favorite way to experience fantasy games. I mean, technically the Might and Magic series kinda looks similar, but it's just not the same when you can't see the weapon in your hands and you overthink when trying to imagine how is your party traveling in this line formation all the time. Do they hold each other's hands or something? No matter. The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion gave me even more freedom to run around with a weapon in my hand that I can see in detail, and since then I'm firmly convinced that this is the most immersive experience a fantasy game can have. And also I love swords. Not giant ones, regular-sized and shaped swords. Soon it will be 20 years almost already, but there's not a lot of other games that give you this option, a first-person melee wombat in a fantasy or at least medieval setting. It was mostly Skyrim all the way. Seriously, like, think of how many shooters came out since then. I understand that this is a very, very specific thing that I'm looking for, like for example Fury sex games with red dragons, and I just searched Steam and there are games for that audience. But is my favorite kind of gameplay really so rare? So join me while I list 9 fantasy/medieval games with a first-person view and melee combat, and help me choose which one is the best of them all. Just to be clear, I will not cover games that may look similar or have some aspects of what I'm looking for, like for example Metal Hellsinger. Even if it has some melee combat with a sword, it's still a shooter, though a great one. Neither will I talk about Ghost Runner series, because it's pure cyberpunk, just with a katana. And finally, nor VR games, because I have never played any VR games and I hate to talk about something that I'm not familiar with. That said, what I will talk about is... Long ago, actually the same year when Oblivion came out, the Might and Magic series was firmly associated with either party-based RPGs or turn-based strategies. And it was quite a surprise when Dark Messiah of Might and Magic gave us a completely new kind of game, a first-person action RPG, or rather an action with RPG elements. You could choose to upgrade your magic skills and be a Wizard of the Flaming Finger, or even go rogue and be a sneaky stealth archer, but now we have Skyrim exactly for that purpose. Where the game really stands out is the melee combat, that was truly revolutionary at the time and feels fun even today. The movement can be unusual for those of you who haven't played many shooters in the early 2000s, but the physics of objects that you can kick, crush or throw adds environmental interactivity to the combat, while slashing your enemies and blocking their blows gives the combat its heft and crunchiness. Is that even a word? Dark Messiah of Might and Magic is a simple and linear, classic old-school fantasy adventure with good fighting and silly ragdoll corpses. And as a bonus, you have a sexy demon inside your body. And who doesn't love a sexy demon? Chivalry and Mordhau. They kinda share one place in this list, because they are almost the same game, a massive multiplayer medieval slasher, where the whole point is to kill anyone before they kill you. Well, preferably not someone from your team, I guess, but I'm still getting there. So, if you're not familiar, first there was Chivalry Medieval Warfare in 2012. Then, 7 years later, Mordhau became its spiritual successor, but couple of years after that Chivalry 2 came out, and currently these two games split the fans of the genre between themselves. From my quite short experience with them, I can say that both games take some time to even grasp the basics of combat. But after a couple of hours of trial and error, I felt kinda more or less competent enough. I mean enough to enjoy the process and not to be instantly smashed by any other player. I still don't know all the aspects in which these two games are different and which one I like more. Chivalry 2 has better graphics, but Mordhau has much more customization options. Chivalry 2 is considered easier for the beginners to get into, but Mordhau have more detailed combat mechanics, which make much more important the role of the personal skill of the player and practice. Mordhau has modding tools and servers with pretty wild mods. From the other hand, if you like more atmospheric immersion and less silly goofiness, Chivalry has more of the former and less of the latter. Mordhau has a Demon Horde game mode, which is cool, but Chivalry has a map where your objective is to carry piggies to the boat, which is a clear winner for me. What I can say is that the first-person combat in these games feels impactful and satisfying, with only one downside. Being massive multiplayer online games, a lot depends heavily on the quality and stability of the internet connection. Because if it's not perfect, your hits will miss the opponent when it looks like they shouldn't have, and you will have a heavy disadvantage in combat, and I don't recommend to play this way. In many aspects, Chivalry and Mordhau present medieval warfare exactly as I always imagined it to be, and as Andrzej Sapkowski has perfectly summarized in this quote from the Witcher books. Real wars have as much in common with discipline and order as a whorehouse with a fire raging through it. Now, hear me out before you comment that combat in Skyrim is crap and I don't know what I'm talking about. Yes, vanilla game is truly terrible with its melee weapons, but thankfully it is very mod friendly and many talented people have made many cool mods that improve all the aspects of the game. Specifically talking about first-person melee combat, there are several great videos I easily found on YouTube which explain which mod does what and demonstrate their effects on the gameplay. All the links will be in the description. Just be ready to learn how to mod Skyrim and then patiently install around 20 different files, some of which depend on other files in order for it to work properly. But they do make a difference. Much more satisfying blocking and visible impact of the blows feel more natural, as I can imagine it having never hit anyone with an axe, except myself. Maybe not the strongest contender for a win in the category, but Skyrim is definitely worth checking out with those combat mods. But you've probably done that already with your Skyrim, right? If Skyrim is too mainstream for you, then how about this game? Elderborn is a game about being a barbarian and rushing through the dungeons of an ancient forbidden city. Combat is everything here. There is nothing to distract you from smashing and kicking your enemies while rocking to the cool soundtrack. And the combat is amazing, almost a dance of dodges and blows, blocking and parrying and counterattacks. You start with only a sword, but you'll soon find several different weapons, each with its own moveset and type of damage, so figuring out what works best against which enemy is a lot of fun. The game has a progression system with 3 branches: power, speed and resilience, and you unlock new moves by collecting a glowing substance called essence from killed enemies and some containers. But be careful, because if you are killed, you drop all the unspent essence and have to return to the place of your demise from the nearest checkpoint pool, with all the enemies revived. Altogether, a simple but cool experience, which feels exactly how it looks, and it looks pretty metal. Now, this game is a single-player medieval RPG, which comes as close to the game I've always wanted as possible. Of course, it's not fantasy, and the lack of slightly dressed succubi spoils the whole deal, but
You can't always get what you want.
But just aside, the game is awesome, and its combat system is as unusual as it is fun when you've got the gist of it. Timed blocks and riposte is very important in duels, and it takes some skill of the player, not just your character. Every weapon feels different, and there are many kinds of weapons with their own benefits, and it all is based on a quite realistic role-playing system. What is especially cool is the realism of challenge your opponents present. 2 or 3 armed bandits can be a great danger to the unexperienced and poorly armed traveler, like me. This is not a game where you are literally god of war. Your protagonist has a long way ahead of him to be more or less competent in duels with armored enemies. But thanks to that, every win feels amazing. A great game with rich atmosphere of medieval Central Europe, many colorful characters and feeling of a real adventure. A worthy experience to any RPG lover. This game is not quite medieval, because it's very much set in the Stone Age, but I really wasn't expecting how much I would enjoy this hunter-gatherer simulator exactly because of its weapons. Bows are good for hunting prey, but you have plenty of stuff for killing other homos. Yes, technically we are all homo, deal with it. Spears that you can thrust and throw, clubs that you can smash with, they all teach you a special kind of melee combat. No fencing of course, and no armor or shields, but weirdly enough this kind of combat feels more realistic and fun than many fantasy RPGs I've played. Add to that different tricks like traps and throwable shards and bombs, and of course animals you can tame like wolves, lions, bears, and the ultimate apex predator, the badger. The game is a lot of fun if you like nature and violence at the same time. Even though it's named Far Cry, it's definitely not a shooter, and it even has some fantasy elements, like for example the mental connection with your owl that lets you see the world through the bird's eyes, to which we are already used to thanks to all the Assassin's Creed games that don't even bother to explain it by in-game lore. Maybe Far Cry Primal is not everyone's cup of tea, but definitely earns a place on my list. Talking about exceptions from the rule, Dishonored games almost didn't make it to this list. Set in a steampunk, no, more like a whale oil punk 19th century inspired European setting, they are more of a stealth-oriented adventures, because the less people you kill, the less chaos your action produce, and the better ending you will get. But for the second playthrough, I recommend embracing the chaos and immersing yourself in the violent side of the game, because the sword combat combined with the supernatural powers is unlike anything you've ever experienced in a game. Or maybe even in the real life, I don't know you and your lifestyle. Going in guns blazing is not easy in Dishonored. You will not have enough bullets and bolts to just shoot everybody you meet, so your blade will be your main weapon. You don't have to be upfront all the time, you can assassinate whoever you want, the chaos doesn't care as long as people get killed. Many cinematic finishing moments will take you on a power trip, and you will finally have a use for those charms that you didn't use in the stealthy playthrough. I especially liked Dishonored 2, a very stylish and beautiful game that took all the best parts from its prequel and cranked it up to overload. And one of my personal favorites, Warhammer Vermintide 2. The game is obviously set in the dark world of Warhammer fantasy. The deep lore and unique atmosphere are enough to hook you right from the start, together with charismatic heroes and the whole grotesque vibe. But when we are talking about combat, this is where the fun truly begins. Fast-paced, gory action does not fully describe the experience. The whole idea is to withstand hordes of weaker enemies, watch out for the dangerous specials, and use team tactics to take down bosses. And while you do it, you switch between melee and ranged weapons, learn to master your moves and polish the cooperation with your teammates. Or just rush ahead swinging in random matches with strangers of various skill levels. Last November, the game launched Versus mode, giving players what they've always wanted, an option to play as a rat or even a troll, like we don't have enough of those on the internet. The array of different weapons and different playstyles for each hero in Vermintide is amazing, and the only one flaw of the game is that it is not an RPG. It's an online multiplayer party-based slasher. So when you finish all the maps and all the expansions and level up your character and your gear to the maximum level, there's just not that much to do except the same thing all over again. But it's my taste. I would really love a full RPG in the world of Warhammer Fantasy with this combat. Now, theoretically, I could add Mount & Blade games to this list, but first-person camera there is quite bad for melee combat. It's quite good for ranged, like shooting bows and crossbows, but it almost doesn't show your weapon movement, and it's very important to see your weapon movements in these games, so I end up using only third-person camera, and that is why these games are not on the list. And that's literally all the games with this specific first-person experience that I found. Good news is, this February, we will have 2 new games that should be added to this list, and I cannot wait to play them. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which just looks like the best parts of the first game plus updated amazing graphics. And Obsidian's Avowed, set in the worlds of Pillars of Eternity and looking to be the RPG experience many people, including me, have been waiting for since our 100th playthrough of Skyrim. I hope we will not be disappointed.
So, concerning the list, which game do you think have the best first-person melee combat? Maybe I forgot some games that should be there. Waiting to read your comments. So thank you for watching. Consider subscribing to my channel. I am still Not-a-witchr, and as always, take care and farewell.